Here we go again. This motherfucker with his hyperbolic titles and assertions. We are all parasites. Are we really? Basically. There's probably some people here and there that are not. But all of us, for the most part, at least part-time, are in some way, shape, or form parasites. So we get this term from the field of biology, right? And a parasite is an organism. Have you noticed how a lot of people just spout out shit without ever defining what it is they mean by the words that they use, assuming that everyone just understands them point blank, motherfucking period? How close-minded can you be, right? Everybody does not share your worldview. And it just so happens that ideologically driven people will reverse engineer reality, as we've been talking about on this channel for many years now, and create their own definitions. And yes, this video is going to be all over the place. I'm going to go on quite a few fucking tangents. It is what it is. Most recently, seeing as I've been quote-unquote attacking the atheist, or more precisely, no quotes this time, attacking the atheistic worldview insofar as I see it here online, charging them with the fact that, you know, they create their own reality. They just make shit up. They have their own definitions, right? I asked a simple question. Simple question. I'm not going to reiterate it now, but we're talking about, you know, Don Quixote and Romeo and Juliet and God, right? No atheist had the balls to answer the question. One came around and completely changed the question, yeah? And then started answering it. So I did what I promised I would do, and I got rid of that fucking parasite. So, but this is what they do, right? This is the dishonesty of these ideologically possessed people. They're not interested in what it is that you're talking about. They want to force their worldview onto you and their own definitions. And look, the only force that I will accept is truth, logic. Because look, if you're truthful, if there's virtue in the things that you're saying, such as truth and logic, reason, then I accept that, right? I have to. I'd be a hypocrite otherwise. So if you could convince me using those methods, then yeah, you could act like an authoritarian, basically, if you so choose. But don't just try to force your fucking worldview when it doesn't make any goddamn sense. And if you're going to come over here to talk to me after I lay out the parameters of the conversation, after I lay down the ground rules, well, abide by those rules or GTFO. Right? Because we have to have a common understanding, or we have to agree. We have to share a base from which we take off in order for a conversation to even take off in the first place, right? Because if you're taking off from fucking La La Land, and I'm taking off where I'm taking off from, and it's not La La Land, unless you could prove it is, then obviously we're not going to agree on anything. So if I'm asking the question, you can't pretend like you're answering the question by changing the question. It doesn't make any sense. You're being dishonest. Now again, if you want to tell me that the question is wrong, or the analogy is wrong, but then you have to provide some argument and not a straw man. Anyway, shout out to all the atheists. You guys are still failing to make sense. You know, I guess I triggered the Fox strikes with a lot of my assertions about, you know, atheism, reality, morals, and God, so on and so forth. So much, in fact, I triggered this person that he just kept answering every single little thing in the video. So I said, hey man, you know, Let's have a friendly conversation, debate, call it whatever the fuck you want to call it. Let's have a live, let's, they're not hangouts anymore, I guess, but let's have a, let's get on a live stream and let's discuss this. Let's see, if we can find some kind of common ground. No answer, right? No answer. People like to snipe from their safe space, basically. They don't really want to be challenged. I'm not afraid of being challenged because I'm convinced that the basis of my logic is truth. If you could show me otherwise, then I'll be forever grateful to you. So, show me otherwise. Shouldn't be that difficult. So if you're listening, Fox, let's talk on a live stream. Let's talk about God, morality, science, so on and so forth. Scientism. Anyway, back to the topic at hand, parasites. From biology, again, we get this definition: an organism living in, on, or with another organism in order to obtain nutrients, grow, or multiply, often in a state that directly or indirectly harms the host, right? This term has been taken from biology and applied to society, and I guess this is what this video is about: parasites in society, economics. You have a lot of these people out there who are generally, pro free market. They call themselves capitalist, even though they don't actually own any means of production, not privately, right? And yet they call themselves capitalists. This is something I've been talking about forever, right? Do we need to define capitalism again? Yeah, maybe, just so we could all be on the same page. But basically, capitalism is an economic system where the means of production are privately owned, right? Are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Now, my argument was that this thing that you call the state is basically, what they don't tell you is that it's a corporation. Look, I'll prove it to you because I've been dropping clues forever, and I know a lot of you already know this, but I've been dropping clues forever, like showing you that your municipality is incorporated, right? And again, you have to understand language, because whatever is written on like a road sign or a legal document, anything in that sphere, right? That's written in legalese. Because you could very well incorporate meat into your diet, or carrots or whatever, right? But we're using a different language when we use the word incorporate to say basically include or join or put together, right? When it comes to legalese, a corporation is something very different. Very, very different. It's a corpus, right? It's a body. It's a legal person, right? That's where it comes from. So if you go to Cornell Law School, right, they'll tell you exactly what the United States is, right? The United States is a federal corporation, okay? A federal corporation. It's right there in black and white, or white and black, right? The evidence is everywhere. Proof is everywhere. It's all around you. So, to act, and the confusion must be fostered in order to keep you in the dark, right? You're supposed to believe that you have some kind of democratic power when, I mean, it's always the electoral college that elects the president. You don't have a say. All that you're doing is you're basically signing a contract with the government when you go to vote to say that no matter what happens, right, I'm cool with it. I support the system, right? I'm part of this process, and I will submit to it, basically. It always boggles the mind how people go to vote. Let's say, broadly speaking, it's a false dialectic, but we'll engage in it just so that we could be understood, right? This is me going into La La Land so that I could talk to fucking crazy people and be understood. If you go out there and you vote for a free marketeer, capitalist, right? The Republican, the guy on the right, right? And then the leftist, quote unquote, socialist wins, right? Go ask Warren Buffett. Go ask Bill Gates who they vote for. And then ask them about capitalism. And they'll tell you that it's the best system possible. And yet they're on the left. How is that possible? Anyway, false dialectic, basically, right? But it always boggles the mind how people who vote for the capitalist and the socialist, quote unquote, socialist gets elected. And, you know, all of a sudden they're like, oh, I wash my hands of, it's not my, not my president. It's not my responsibility. Motherfucker, when you sign that contract, it's not like you go to vote knowing and expecting, like it's guaranteed that just because you're voting for someone and certain policies that you think that this person espouses and will put into place, lo and behold, another fucking tangent. That never almost happens, not when it comes to the important issues. But it's not like when you go to vote for a capitalist, you're voting for a capitalist system, dummy. You're voting for whoever wins. You're giving your voice away. Voce, your vote is your voice. You're giving it away. Whoever wins, whatever the fuck they do. And it doesn't matter if the capitalist wins, as aforementioned, the so-called capitalist, because the agenda is going to be what it's going to be. Right? Duh. So people who vote for, let's say, the right and then the left wins, then they act like it's not their fault. Of course it's your fault. Of course you're responsible because you're supporting the fucking system. The system isn't telling you that just because you vote for some words that some person spoke, not only is that person not obligated to you to put into action the words that they spoke trying to get your vote, B, you're not guaranteed that they're going to win anyway. It's like playing the lottery and hoping to win and then not winning and wanting your fucking money back. Are you retarded? Where were we? So, United States, the Congo, whatever the fuck it's called these days, right? The EU or any of the individual constituents of that, mega corporations, any of the smaller corporations that have merged into this big corporation, just the same as all the US states, smaller corporations that merge into this big one, right? Ultimately, it's just a corporation. Do you own this corporation? Do you have stake in that corporation? Do you actually have a say in how that corporation is being run? I don't care what they tell you. What is the reality? No, you don't. So can we honestly say that these are publicly owned? I know they call them that, but are these publicly owned corporations? Or they don't even call them that. They just call them public corporations. But are they truly owned by the public? Are you really reaping the benefits? Are you profit sharing when it comes to this corporation? No, you don't have a say. Not really. So it's a lot more accurate, and I know the truth is really somewhere in the middle, but it's really a lot more accurate to agree that these are privately owned corporations, right? Private interests have the ultimate say. Just because they take some suggestions from you and they let you protest, maybe even encourage it sometimes, that doesn't really mean that you're in charge, right? Somebody else is a private entity, okay? Now, it might be a conglomerate or a society of certain people, yeah? It may have a board of directors and maybe the responsibility and the decision-making is somewhat shared amongst the elites, but ultimately, they're all private entities. So, long story short, to sit there and to call anything that's happening anywhere in the world today, insofar as entire countries or corporations are concerned, socialism, you're literally retarded. Ignorant, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But there are all these people who are supposedly capitalists, even though they don't actually own any capital. Well, let's go back to capitalism. right? What is capitalism? It's an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production. What are the means of production? And their operation for profit, right? That's all. That's it. We don't need to go any further than that. You could have a socialist economy that also has businesses in it, right? Just because someone is a business owner or a businessman or somebody conducts business, that doesn't make him a capitalist. That's not what capitalism is in essence, dummy. Right? You could very well have a socialist entity that does all of those things. Right? We have to be able to differentiate between these terms and these concepts and these various economic systems before we could have an honest conversation, before we could actually talk about that which we think we're talking about. In economics and sociology, the means of production, also called capital goods or productive property, are physical and non-financial inputs used in the production of goods and services with economic value, right? These include raw materials. Now, what are something like raw materials? Well, I don't know. Ore, oil, gold, right? All those things. Where do you get those things from? The ground, right? Where do you get, in order to own these raw materials, these means of production, you got to own land, right? Do any of you own land? Now, there are some people in the world that own land, but most of you, if not all of you listening to this, you don't own any land, because so long as you're paying somebody, call it taxes, call it whatever the fuck you want to call it, to be able to be and use that land, you're merely renting it, right? Let's define things properly so that our arguments have virtue. So, raw materials, right? All of that goes back to land. Facilities, right? Like buildings, factories, so on and so forth. They don't float around in the air, and even if they did, airspace is owned also, right? They need land. You need to own the land on which the facility is built in order to be able to say that you own the facility, right? So this harkens back to, or relates back to, the foundation, right? The land. Machinery, same thing, same, right? Even if they were somehow able to float around in air, well, that's owned also, right? And tools. None of these things are possible without land, right? Which is why you see this here, even though it's not too explicit. Productive property, right? Ultimately, everything goes back to the land. That is the most important in any economic system. That is the most important means of production, because without land, none of these, without being able to own the land, you can't say that you own any of these things, right? Because raw materials come from the land, facilities need land to be built on, and machinery sit on fucking land, and tools also, right? So ultimately, if we are to just break it down to the bare bones, the fucking skeleton, the foundation, literally, the means of production is basically another word for land. Now, if all land, as I stated many times before, on this planet is privately owned, which it is, okay, 99.9%, right? And the shit it seems like it's not privately owned, well, I mean, that's probably just an illusion. But for the most part, definitely in the Western world, everything is already privately owned. Thus, it's impossible to have a socialist system where all the means of production are privately owned, dummies. So anybody who says, oh, this is socialism, that is socialism, you are dead wrong. Now, could certain measures or economic policies, could they have more of a left leaning, if you will, in this sort of spectrum that I'm painting here? False dialectic, keep that in mind. Is it maybe fair to say or characterize them as more socialist? Sure. Redistribution, things of that nature? Maybe. However, I could sweep that rug from under your feet, because if the foundation is purely capitalistic, can you really call these little facets of this capitalist system, such as redistribution of wealth, can you really call that socialism? No, not really. It's merely a handout from within the capitalist system. You're getting crumbs from the people that own everything, basically. But this is why it's a false dialectic, because if all the means of production are privately owned, it's impossible to have truly a socialist economic system. It's not possible. How? When socialism is a political system or a social system, or more precisely probably when it comes to this conversation, an economic system characterized by social ownership of the means of production, right? That's all of us, or the people in any given area, actually owning the means of production, or the land. Not paying taxes to anybody, owning the land and profiting from that land without getting their productive capacity stolen from them, without being wage slaves. So even if you run a business, but you have to rent out somebody else's land, you're still not a capitalist in the purest sense of the word. You're just a wage slave. I mean, okay, so you make your own hours, which is all the goddamn fucking time, not just 9 to 5, right? You work so much harder, and maybe you're getting more for your time spent, but that's really it. You're just more enterprising, entrepreneurial, you're more outgoing perhaps, you're better able to navigate this whacked out economy that we have here. Thus, you are rewarded more. But ultimately, you are working for somebody else because they're skimming off the top, right? So you have a lot of these so-called capitalists who don't own any capital, not really, complaining about the socialist system that's oppressing them, right? I mean, talk about Dunning-Krugers, you know what I mean? And complaining about these parasites in society, right? These economic parasites that are stealing their productive capacity from them. And instead of pointing at the people that are, holding the leash to which their fucking face mask is attached, they're pointing the finger at this other person that also has their mask on, and the master is holding that same fucking leash, right? This is why false dialectics, false dichotomies, Hegelian dialectics work for the controllers, right? They set the masses against one another, and they rob everybody, basically. They need you fighting one another instead of fighting the controller, right? So these so-called capitalists, or generally these people on the right who are, pro-free market, and they call people who get welfare or something like that, parasites. Not only are they not seeing who the real parasite is, right? Who the real problem is. I'm not saying that people that aren't on welfare aren't parasites, but they're definitely not benefiting from any sort of socialist system, right? Socialism is an economic system. Well, what's economy, right? What is the economy? Let's look it up. If socialism is an economic system, an economy is an area of first word used to define economy, production. After you have production, then you have distribution and trade of these goods, right? That you need these means of production. In a socialist economy, we all own the means of production, thus the goods. In a capitalist economy, that shit is privately owned. So in order for these parasites to be called socialist, wouldn't they have to contribute to the production, distribution, and trade, as well as the consumption of goods? Not just the consumption of goods and services, but the production, distribution, and trade. If these people aren't involved in any of that, then how can you say they're part of any economy, be it capitalist or socialist? They're not. They can't be. If they're just sitting on their ass all day, not producing anything, that they're neither socialist nor capitalist, and so in the economic sense. So this is none of this shit that people tell you out there makes any fucking sense. Why? Because nobody defines these words that they use, they just throw them out there expecting everyone to just accept the definitions that they don't even themselves have a very clear view of, or definition of the, yeah, buttery butter, I know. I'm being a little bit redundant here, I guess. But they don't even have this clarified idea of, speaking of ghee, clarified idea of what these words actually mean. They expect you to like be a mind reader and a magician and agree with them. They think they could just throw that shit out there and everybody understands. Socialism bad, capitalism good. What? So, long story short, I don't see how somebody who sits on their ass and doesn't do anything, I'll accept that they are a parasite, but I won't accept that they are socialists, because in a socialist economy, as in any economy, the thing that's first and foremost is production. So if you don't produce anything, I don't understand how you could be part of any economy. You feel me? Okay. Be it socialist or capitalist. So to call those people, designate them, I do agree that they are parasites, but to designate them as socialist parasites, you're not making any fucking sense. Just because they're getting a handout from a fundamentally capitalist system, how does that make them socialists? How? When they don't own any means of anything, right? Definitely not production. They don't own shit. I'm exaggerating, but you get the point. Let me take a sip of my water. So, you have these financial capitalists. Look, people, well, we'll get to that in a second. These so-called capitalists, right, who don't actually own any means of production because they have to pay the boss man. They're acting like these people that are getting literally crumbs, you know, from the government welfare, literally crumbs. They're acting like they're the problem here without realizing that it's the boss man that got all of us masked up, right? Muzzled. That's the person, those are the people that are the problem. And those people, all of them, whether they're on the left, on the right, they're capitalists. Ask Warren Buffett who he votes for. It's really not that. Look at who Bill Gates votes for. All of these people are pro-capitalism because capitalism is imperialism. It's the private ownership of everything. It's the basis of greed versus socialism. And in my opinion, that goes way too far to the left. But socialism is what we share in everything, right? I'm not on board with either idea, just FYI. I think some kind of a hybrid system where there's property that's privately owned, as well as there's property that if we choose to, we could own publicly. We all get the benefit from it, right? But that's not the world that we live in. Everything is privately owned. We live in a fundamentally capitalist system, and that's a fact. So you can't blame socialism when the underpinnings of this entire world as it exists today are very much capitalist. Okay? Stop being an ideologue. Start being truthful, reasonable, and honest. Just because you own a business, that doesn't make you a capitalist, dummy. Anyway, it really doesn't. You have to own capital to be a capitalist. Anyway, so these people, these so-called business people, will point a finger at these quote-unquote socialist parasites, people on welfare, and act as if they were the problem. But it just so happens that, not all, but most of these people, these so-called capitalists, are engaged in what's called financial capitalism and or speculation. Now again, yes, I can speculate about the weather tomorrow, But that's not the same meaning, even though it's the same word, as financial speculation. So just because somebody buys something low and then sells it later at a higher price, that doesn't make them, that's not speculation in the same sense as financial speculation. It could be necessarily, and I agree the line is a little blurry, but financial capitalism and that sort of speculation is, you're not adding anything to, you're not even, most of the time you're not even actually holding or using the goods that you acquire. If you're even acquiring goods, a lot of the times you're just acquiring financial instruments. You're literally making money out of money. You don't even really have any tangible physical holdings. It's all imaginary. It's all just financial instruments and concepts, right? Promissory notes. It's all a bunch of fucking promises to pay. So I'm not talking about somebody who, buys a bunch of material, construction material, and then sells it later at a higher price, right? But also distributes it and provides a certain kind of a service at the same time, right? If somebody buys, let's say, a whole goat and then chops it up and sells it piece by piece, maybe even delivering it, right? That's not speculation. There's added value there, okay? People who just buy shit or mostly financial instruments in order to later sell them at a higher price, what value are they adding to the economy? That's my question, right? Because these parasites that just take welfare, right? They're not adding anything to the economy. They're not adding any value to the economy. Look, economy is very, very simple. Super simple. It's been made complex in order to fucking skim off the top and to con you out of your fucking money. That's why they have all these financial instruments and usury and all this bullshit, right? That's why they grabbed control of money. That's what centralized money is. It's fucking theft. The way it exists anyway. It doesn't have to be that way, but that is what it is right now. None of us really own any money anymore. Money is owned by somebody else. They get to do whatever the fuck they want to do with it. Inflate it, deflate it, and then skim off the fucking top. Right? But economy is very, very simple. Basic economy, just economy, if you will, is really simple. In a perfect world, in such an economy, you would have just enough money, promissory notes, covering the amount of transactions happening, or the amount of goods out there. Maybe a little bit more, right? Because invariably people will hoard stuff or hold on to stuff, or they'll hoard money or hold on to money. But you will have enough money in that system to facilitate all the physical transactions of all the goods that exist. It's really that simple, right? So in order to be able to get money in that just economy, you have to produce something. That's it, right? So I produce food, or you build houses, or you build cars, or iPhones, or whatever, right? And then people give you money for that stuff, and how they got that money was by producing something other than themselves. So in that sort of an economy, and the reason why that would be a just economy is because every single piece of money out there is backed by our productive capacity, right? The money supply isn't inflated on end just to steal cheap shit from China, right? You have to actually produce something so that China could give you shit too. And the money is just a vehicle of exchange, right? It's simplified or facilitated, or how do I put this? It's making transactions easier than barter, right? It's the next step above barter, making it easier. Using money is like bartering, but you're bartering money, but that money really represents other goods, basically. Now, that would be a just economy. So the reason why those people are parasites, the people on welfare, is because they take money without putting anything into the economy, any goods or even services, right? They just sit on their ass, allegedly, and they just take money and they consume without producing. That's it, right? So when you get free money, you go to the store and you buy some food. Well, you didn't put anything into the economy, right? You're a burden on the economy. You're a burden on, if the economy is a host, you're a fucking parasite. But how is a financial speculator any different? Right? If you're just speculating on goods and services without adding any value to them, without, moving them from place to place and facilitating, construction or what have you. If you're just buying this country's currency at a low value, hoping that it will be, it'll go up in price relative to some other currency or whatever the vehicle, the financial instrument is, right? If you're just making money out of money, basically, well, I mean, what are you putting into the economy, right? You're just making everybody's shit more expensive, right? If you buy property cheap and you sell it low, or you sell it for more without improving it, right? You're just buying it and then selling it without doing anything to it to make it better or improve it. You're just making everybody's shit more expensive without actually putting anything worthwhile into the economy. If you're just buying and selling currency or Bitcoin or gold or whatever without really adding any value to any of this into the economy, then how are you not a parasite? How are you any different than the bankers? Now, I know they make more. They're bigger parasites than you, no doubt about it. But how are you any different than the banksters when you're using some of the same vehicles, instruments, methods to make money out of nothing, out of thin air, right? Not to mention that, organized trading, or not even organized, but just, people following certain trends in trading, like that could completely inflate or deflate a country's currency, destroying that economy, right? You don't give a shit about any of that. Forcing all these countries to print more and more money in some cases, right? Not to mention that some of this, and some of it is coordinated, right? Trading, or simply because of certain trends and people understanding how the market works and how to get over, right? Not to mention that there's all these casualties out there where you could literally make a entire country go belly up. You could make people starve just by being one speculator out of thousands speculating on a country's fucking currency. You fucking scumbag. That's right. Scumbag. Not only are you a fucking parasite, you're a huge fucking parasite. The only difference between that person sitting on their ass, getting their shit for free, versus you, yeah, you're proactive. Yeah, you're more, I don't know, intelligent, perhaps. You're just more enterprising, right? You're more cunning. Amazing. What a great fucking trait. You're slicker. Yay, kudos, buddy. The only difference between you, financial speculator, sitting on your ass in front of your fucking computer, making money out of money, and the difference between that person sitting on their ass getting their welfare check is that those are passive parasites and you're a fucking aggressive parasite. That's the only fucking difference. But insofar as parasitism goes, you're essentially one and the same. The damage done by you is just far, 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 far more reaching and worse than those passive parasites. And those so-called parasites, according to you, young and enterprising and also smart and cunning and so fucking virtuous parasite, aggressive parasite, it could just be that a lot of those people, and this is the case, a lot of those people that you now call parasites because they're getting government checks, right? because they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and their bodies are just broken down from all the work that they've done their entire fucking life, while you were growing up consuming shit without putting anything into the economy, consuming the goods that they produced. The only one other difference between these so-called parasites and you is that they actually deserve to be fed because they fed your bum ass. And a lot of those people actually produce something and put goods into the economy, while you're just a fucking aggressive parasite. First you were just a little kid, passive parasite, right? And they were hoping that you would grow up to produce something and feed them. But no, instead of doing that, you got into this financial capitalism and all this fucking speculation and fucking lesbian dance theory. Let's add that in. And marketing. Let's put that in. And fucking opening hair salons and fucking nail salons. Whoop-de-fucking do. Like you're adding any kind of value to the economy, right? Those people actually put their blood, sweat, and tears into producing something and putting value into the economy. Whereas you, yourself, never actually did any of that. You were a little passive parasite as a kid. You didn't know any better. You just did what you had to do. What you knew, the only thing that you knew how to do is consume and be a little parasite. But you were cute and it was all good because, those people put that energy into feeding you because the hope was that when they get old and decrepit and they can no longer put value into the economy that they put all this value into over many, many years or decades of their lives, the hope was that you would recognize that and help feed them when it came to. But no, they're parasites, and you're a virtuous parasite. You best hope and pray people like me never get any political power. You best hope and motherfucking pray people like me never get any political power. I don't want any political power. Fuck all that. Just leave me the fuck alone, man. I can fend for myself. But, if we're going to talk about economics and we're going to point fingers and call people parasites, you tell me what it is that you've done to contribute and bring value to this economy. Because if all you're doing is just moving financial instruments around and making everybody's condos more fucking expensive or doing people's hairs and nails, man, you ain't shit. Okay? At the very least, those people that you want to shit on right now, at the very least, they created the conditions necessary for you to be able to survive while consuming and not producing anything. And now that it's your fucking turn to help them out, well, the economy is in the shitter, right? And you're pointing the finger at them, at the people that produced things and kept the shit going, while all you do is fucking consume. And that's all you ever did your entire life. You're calling them parasites. Man, I ain't all of you cocksuckers up against the wall, man. Straight up. I'm not even playing. I can't wait for the day of reckoning. Hopefully it comes in my lifetime. Hopefully. Right? Shout out to all the old farts out there, man. I feel sorry for you cocksuckers too. Take it easy.